Now, this month, Newsnight Scotland will be looking forward to the May elections with a series of interviews with all the main party leaders. Tonight is the turn of the Scottish Greens co-convenor, Patrick Harvie. Here's a brief look at his career so far. Patrick Harvie left his hometown of Dumbarton in the early 90s to go to Manchester Metropolitan University. Once there, he switched subjects numerous times before leaving without a degree. In 1997, he began a career as a youth worker and later as a development worker for the Gay Men's Project at Face Scotland, where he worked for 6 years. His political career began in 2001 when Patrick Harvie joined the Glasgow branch of the Scottish Green Party, standing as a candidate in the 2003 Scottish elections. He was elected that May as a regional MSP for Glasgow. He was one of 7 Green Party members of the Parliament that session, a high point for the Greens at Holyrood. He survived the 2007 election, but the Greens were down to just 2 MSPs. He became convener of the Transport, Infrastructure and Climate Change Committee, and he was later elected co-convener of the Greens in 2008. A year later, the Greens flexed their muscles when they withdrew support for that year's budget bill, leading to its downfall and delay. A prolific tweeter, he came in for criticism for posting updates during a private dinner with the then Prime Minister Gordon Brown. Well, before we came on air, I spoke to Patrick Harvie and I began by asking him what his main policy pitch to the electorate is.
I think that the Scottish Parliament really hasn't explored as radically as it could the existing powers that we have. We've got the opportunity to empower local government to have a wider range of financial tools available than we've given them so far. That could protect public services and investment in the kind of jobs that are going to be required in Scotland in the years and decades to come. If that investment dries up now, we'll come to regret it.
What does that mean in practical terms? Because, as you know, the SNP government has tried all sorts of ways to get this, to get more finance into whether levering private finance or setting up the Futures Trust and all the rest of it. What do you have that's any different?
Well, we've produced short-term ideas just this week, a way of raising revenue on untaxed business assets, closing a loophole in the business rates. That could bring in 75 million a year and could be done fairly quickly. We've produced long-term plans as well for replacing council tax and the business rates with a land value tax, which could raise 1.5 billion more than those 2 taxes combined and still be socially progressive. So poorer people paying less, richer people paying more, and some of the businesses that have untaxed assets paying their share as well. You know, we really have the opportunity at the moment to live up to the hopes and aspirations that people had when the Scottish Parliament was campaigned for and ultimately voted for. I don't think people wanted a UK government that had no mandate in Scotland. I actually don't think they have a mandate for these cuts at all, because they weren't in the Tory manifesto or the Liberal Democrat manifesto, but they have no mandate in Scotland. I don't think people campaigned for a parliament that would be supine, that would just roll over and say, do as you will, and we'll hand on the cuts.
Okay.
The financial powers that people voted for clearly aren't enough in terms of the Scottish variable rate, but that's something that needs to be restored as an option. But we can create our own financial powers, the kind of powers John Swinning and his colleagues call for day in and day out. We can create that for ourselves if we just give the power away to communities and to local government.
Well, you've clearly got a list, shopping list, if you like, of things, practical proposals. What are your feelings about what you might do, assuming there are Greens in Parliament after the election? Would you go into a coalition, say, with Labour?
Well, at every election so far, there have been Greens in the Scottish Parliament, and so I'm confident that we can put our case to return some Greens, hopefully lots of Greens, in the next session. We've always, whether there have been 1 of us, 7 of us, or in this session, 2 of us, we've always been constructive where we can be, worked together where there's genuine common ground, but challenging when that's been necessary. And we would continue that approach.
So you, in other words, you wouldn't like to be part of the formal coalition because you couldn't really do that?
Well, that depends on the result of the election. That depends on what the numbers are. The party has a clear democratic process for agreeing whatever kind of cooperation arrangement exists in any session of the party. That would be agreed democratically by the party membership. The most important point, though, is what's the content of any agreement, whether that's an informal case-by-case, issue-by-issue agreement, or whether it's something more formal. the content of any agreement must be progressive, must safeguard not just the environmental objectives, the social objectives and the economic objectives, but actually respond well to the political challenge of our age. And that really does mean facing up to the UK government's cuts from the Tories down south.
But are you saying that if you went into a coalition, or as you say, on an issue-by-issue basis, or you had some sort of confidence and supply agreement to prop up a minority administration, to use the jargon, that you yourself, as MSPs, would have to go and ask the Green Party approval for everything you did? You could never go into a stable alliance. Is that what you're saying?
No, that's not the case. If we were proposing a formal agreement, if the numbers were right, if it was our best ever result and we were able to sit down with another party and put together any kind of agreement, once that was written down, we would take it to the party and our membership would either approve it or say, no, that's not on.
Right, so
the democratic way political parties used to behave, you remember?
Just to be clear, you're not ruling out a coalition with anyone, with the SNP?
No, I wouldn't rule out any kind of arrangement. The objective is to be constructive wherever possible, find common ground. I think that's an important thing in politics. We've found common ground with, I think, every political party on some issues. We've also found serious disagreements with all the political parties, for example, on their 1960s transport policy.
Last point, as you cannot help but have noticed, there's been all this publicity over the last few days about George Galloway wanting to stand for the Scottish Parliament, Gail Sheridan. This is all in the area where you will personally, actually, as well as the Greens, will be wanting to get votes. Do you think it's helpful or unhelpful to those who consider themselves, if you like, an alternative to the main parties to have all this shenanigans going on?
Well, I suppose on one level, anything that increases the level of interest in the Scottish Parliament election is probably a healthy thing. Disinterest in politics is deeply damaging. I've had experience of contesting elections in Glasgow when the Socialists have been strong, when they've been weak, when they've been organised, or when they've been fighting each other. We've continued to represent Glasgow, and the last election we took our first seats in the council as well, and we took that step forward. I'm content to put my case for green politics being better for people's pocket, reducing housing costs, energy costs, transport costs, better for the economy, better for the environment and society. And people will judge that on its merits. I think the people who really should be worried about the result of the election in Glasgow would be the Liberal Democrats. Many people in Glasgow who voted Liberal Democrat are left-leaning, did want something more radical, and they don't feel they've got what they voted for.
All right, Patrick Harvie, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.